HOA tried to shut my hangar down, but FAA, VA, and the judge all sided with me. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have your passion ripped away by a group of neighbors wielding clipboards and rulebooks? For Jake Sullivan, a retired Air Force veteran and avid pilot, that nightmare became reality when his homeowners association, HOA, in the upscale flying estates of Virginia, tried to shut down his private hangar. His crime? Flying his cherished Cessna 172 too often, they claimed, disrupting their peaceful community. What started as a petty complaint from one nosy neighbor spiraled into a heated battle that pitted Jake's love for aviation against a power-hungry HOA board led by Karen Whitmore, a self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. But Jake wasn't about to let his wings be clipped. This is the story of how one man fought back, exposed the truth, and soared to victory with the FAA, the state of Virginia, and a judge by his side. Jake had moved to Flying Estates 5 years ago, drawn by its promise of a pilot's paradise homes with private hangars and access to a community runway. For a man who'd spent decades in the skies, it was a dream come true. Every morning, he'd roll open his hangar door, run his hands along the sleek fuselage of his Cessna, and take to the air, feeling the rush of freedom that only flying could bring. But trouble brewed when Karen, the HOA president, moved in next door. A retired lawyer with a penchant for control, Karen wasted no time enforcing her vision of a perfect community. Her first target? Jake's flights. She claimed his takeoffs and landings were too frequent, too noisy, and worst of all, a violation of some obscure HOA bylaw buried in a 200-page document Jake had barely skimmed when he bought the property. Soon, Karen rallied a small but vocal group of neighbors, including Bob, a grumpy accountant who hated the sound of propellers, and Susan, a newcomer who thought hangars were eyesores. They demanded Jake limit his flights to once a week or face fines and legal action to shut down his hangar entirely. The accusations hit Jake like a turbulence pocket. Flying Estates was built for pilots, wasn't it? The community's own marketing boasted about its aviation-friendly lifestyle. Yet here was Karen, waving a cease and desist letter, claiming his flights violated noise ordinances and endangered property values. Jake tried reasoning with her, explaining that his plane was well-maintained, his flights followed FAA regulations, and the runway was part of the community's core design. But Karen wouldn't budge. "This isn't your personal airport," she snapped at a heated HOA meeting, her voice dripping with condescension. "We have standards." The room fell silent as Jake, a man of few words but steely resolve, stood up and vowed to fight. Little did Karen know, she just ignited a war she couldn't win. Jake's first move was to dig into the HOA's claims. He pored over the bylaws, FAA regulations, and local ordinances, spending sleepless nights at his kitchen table. That's when he uncovered a bombshell. The HOA's so-called noise ordinance was unenforceable. Federal law, backed by the FAA, preempts local restrictions on aviation activities at federally funded airports, and Flying Estates runway had received FAA grants decades ago. Karen's threats were built on a house of cards. But there was more. A chance conversation with Maria, a quiet neighbor who'd lived in the community since its founding, revealed a twist. Karen had a personal vendetta. Years ago, her vacation home in another state was near an airport, and she'd lost a similar battle against pilots there. Now, she was using her HOA power to settle old scores, targeting Jake to flex her authority. Maria's revelation lit a fire under Jakehi, wasn't just fighting for his hangar, but for every pilot in the community. Armed with this knowledge, Jake took the fight to the next level. He filed a complaint with the FAA, citing their jurisdiction over airspace and airport operations. He also contacted Virginia's Department of Aviation, which confirmed that Flying Estates runway was subject to state and federal oversight, not HOA whims. But Karen and the HOA board doubled down, hiring a flashy lawyer to sue Jake for breach of community standards. The lawsuit demanded he cease all flight operations and dismantle his hangar, claiming it was a public nuisance. Jake, now facing thousands in legal fees, felt the weight of the battle. His savings were dwindling, and the stress was straining his marriage. His wife, Emily, urged him to compromise, but Jake couldn't let go. "This isn't just about me," he told her. eyes blazing. If they win, no one here will fly again. The courtroom showdown was nothing short of electric. Karen's lawyer painted Jake as a reckless flyboy, disturbing the peace with his constant buzzing. They presented doctored logs exaggerating Jake's flight hours and even brought in Bob, who tearfully claimed a low pass had startled his prized poodle. But Jake's lawyer, a scrappy aviation law expert named Tom, was ready. He dismantled the HOA's case with surgical precision, citing FAA regulations that protected Jake's right to fly. Tom also introduced Maria as a surprise witness, who testified about Karen's vendetta and the HOA's selective enforcement. Other pilots, including a board member's cousin, flew without issue. The courtroom gasped as Maria revealed Karen had once tried to ban holiday decorations but backed off when her allies complained. The hypocrisy was glaring. Then came the FAA's report, a game-changer. It confirmed that Fly-In Estates runway was under federal jurisdiction, rendering the HOA's restrictions invalid. Virginia's Department of Aviation echoed this, stating the HOA had no authority to limit flights at a state-registered airstrip. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for fairness, leaned forward as Tom presented his final piece of evidence. A petition signed by 60% of Fly-In Estates residents, many of them pilots or aviation enthusiasts, supporting Jake's right to fly. Karen's face turned ashen. Her allies squirmed in their seats. The judge's ruling was swift and scathing. The HOA's lawsuit was dismissed, their bylaws deemed unenforceable against Jake's aviation activities, and they were ordered to pay his legal fees. The courtroom erupted in cheers as Jake shook Tom's hand, tears welling in his eyes. Karen's reign of terror crumbled that day. Word spread through Fly-In Estates like wildfire, and her credibility as HOA president was shot. At the next board meeting, residents demanded her resignation, citing her abuse of power and wasteful spending on a baseless lawsuit. Bob, humiliated by his poodle story being exposed as exaggerated, sold his home and moved. Susan, the anti-Hangar newcomer, quietly withdrew her complaints after learning her own husband was secretly taking flying lessons. The community rallied around Jake, and Maria, once a wallflower, became a local hero for her courage in speaking out. The HOA, now under new leadership, revised its bylaws to align with FAA regulations, ensuring no pilot would face such harassment again. Jake's victory wasn't just a win for him, it was a beacon of hope for anyone facing an overreaching HOA standing in his hangar, the Cessna gleaming under the Virginia sun. He felt lighter than ever. "This is what freedom feels like," he said, climbing into the cockpit for a victory flight. As he soared above Fly-In Estates, the community below looked different, not a battleground, but a place where dreams could take wing. His story spread across pilot forums and local news, inspiring others to stand up to petty tyrants. Jake proved that when you fight for what's right, with truth and tenacity, even the most powerful bullies can't keep you grounded. What do you think? Was Jake's fight worth the cost, or should he have compromised to keep the peace? Share your thoughts on standing up to HOAs and defending your passions.